dictionary defines second sight as the capacity to see remote or future objects or events, and it refers you to the term clairvoyance, which is defined as the ability to perceive matters beyond the range of ordinary perception. Well, I've had premonitions all my life. Images float before me on invisible waves wherever I happen to be. They invade my conscious mind without warning, without rational explanation, and I can't ever refuse to see or hear. No cards, no palms, no crystal balls. It's as simple as all this. An image appears in front of my eyes. I see my daughter Danielle facing a man. He's tall, handsome, Danielle beautiful, her big eyes smiling. Romeo and Juliet, standing in the aisle of a plane on a cross-Atlantic flight. And suddenly they're gone. Danielle, the young man, gone. A mother's fantasy? Oh, don't get me wrong. I had my fantasies for my daughter, for myself, but that was no fantasy. Barely a month after I'd foreseen this vision of a budding cross-Atlantic romance, my daughter Danielle came to me. She told me she met a young man on a cross-Atlantic flight. She was returning from a skiing trip in Switzerland, and the man was on his way to the States to interview World War II survivors. He was a journalist. He told her she had a beautiful voice, asked her if anyone in her family was musical. She told him she had a biological mother who never talked about her parents, only about her grandfather Daniel. What is this young Swiss journalist trying to prove in his article about the survivors, I asked her. What difference does it make? What? I was asked a simple, natural question. I sounded like I was trying to hide something. She cried. Hide? I began to laugh. My daughter was crying. I was laughing. Even the Spanish Inquisition couldn't force our family to hide its identity. And suddenly, Danielle became all cool and defiant. Don't make a federal case out of it, Mom. Don't drag in the Spanish Inquisition. I was asked a casual question by someone. And what do I tell him? That my great-grandfather had a magnificent big book about family tree encased in a gold box, that my mother never talked about her parents. I never saw a photograph of them. It's as though they never existed. I find it hard to talk about, I told her. I was born in Poland. All my family was killed in the war. I'm the sole survivor. All our documents were lost. He didn't believe me, Danielle cried out. Damn it, Mom. Why can't you retrieve the book of your family tree? You retrieved all the art that the Nazis looted from your grandfather's house. Why don't you get us some proof of who we are? I tried to retrieve it, I told her. But I will try again. Obviously, this person who's asking all these questions is very important to you. I'm asking, Danielle said, her face flushed with anger. And it is important to me. I've always wanted to know who we are, who your mother was. I'll try, I told her. If they haven't melted the gold, if they haven't burned the book, I will try to trace it. I phoned Christian Bauer in Zurich. He was the owner of one of the most prestigious art galleries in Europe. He was the one who helped me retrieve all the art that was looted from my grandfather's house. For years, all I did was describe the paintings and objects to him as I remembered them, and he traced them and bought them for me. No haggling over price, no queries. I described the book of our family tree in my new tale to Christian Bauer. It was handwritten and illustrated, a big leather-bound manuscript encased in a golden box with a branching tree engraved on both sides. He reminded me that he had tried to trace it before. I told him I'd pay for it, pay the price of any masterpieces I had done in the past. We were discreet as always. He didn't ask why, only assured me he'd get back to me as soon as he could. He knew I wouldn't ask him from where or whom he got hold of it. All I cared about was getting it back. With all my clairvoyance and heightened insights, little did I know what was awaiting me. I see. I don't anticipate. I see and foresee. Before the Nazis came to my hometown in Poland, it rained. A large puddle of water formed in front of our house. And in that pool of water, I saw my whole family mowed down by a volley of gunfire. I watched the water turn red before my eyes, saw myself run away from that blood through forests and fields without end. What one sees in a pool of water is worth 1,000 words, Grandfather Daniel said. Your eyes, my child, are a mirror of doom. He knew my nightmare vision. There was only one person who ever shared in the mysteries and terrors of my premonitions, and that was my Grandfather Daniel. Only Grandfather Daniel talked about my gift, and then only when we were alone. But one day, I knew I wasn't alone. Not felt, knew I was being shadowed. It was months after I had set out to trace the book of our family tree. I was sitting on a bench by the East River having a bite of lunch. A white-haired man approached me. He was tall, spoke softly with a slight Dutch accent. Miss Blake, he said, I am Theo Van Damme. He held out his hand. I reached up and clasped his hand. But it was his eyes that held me. His eyes were dark. I always look first at eyes, but his eyes remained stolid, inscrutable. I felt a warning tremor inside. May I, Van Damme asked politely, indicating the bench. When I nodded, he sat down, reached in his pocket, and pulled out a little photograph, a snapshot of a lovely little girl, age 7, her eyes wide with delight. Please find her, Van Damme said. You have the gift. I've been to a medium in Amsterdam. The medium told me Anna Blake has the gift. I have waited for today, my granddaughter Perry's birthday. She's vanished. Find her, and I will help you locate the book of your family tree. It was all so bizarre and confusing. You help me find her, and I will help you locate the book of your family tree. It was all so bizarre and confusing. A life of premonitions and visions hadn't prepared me for this. Theo Van Damme had been told to find me in Manhattan by a medium in Amsterdam, a medium who was privileged to information I had never imparted to any living soul, not even my daughter Danielle. You have the gift, Van Damme repeated, and handed me an envelope filled with his granddaughter's pictures. Find her, and I will help you locate the book of your family tree. When I was 7 years old, my grandfather's mystical teachings made perfect sense to me. No divine voice will call upon you, my child. God is sanity. Evil men try to thwart God's sanity in us. You were born with second sight. You will be awakened by need. Others will aid and guide you as the need arises. But you yourself will chart your calling and intercede. Intercede. Playing detective looking for missing little girls, it all seemed like a practical joke. Suddenly, the utter simplicity of my grandfather's mystical teachings were incomprehensible to me. We were not a cult, had no infallible hierarchy to obey, no rituals, no dogmas, just 4 ancient glass coins with the imprint of the eagle, the lion, the cat, the image of man from Ezekiel's prophecy, and an ornate silver dagger, and a verbal legacy that sounded like riddles. My daughter Danielle once asked me if I believed in this mystical psychic stuff. My daughter didn't know I was clairvoyant, but my extensive library on mysticism intrigued her, and there were the occasional questions and the evasive answers. No one turns his visions into fortunes clairvoyantly, I told her. Unethical, she asked with a mischievous smile. No magic. You can earn a Fabergé egg. You cannot make it fly. My grandfather drummed into my head that mysticism is the exploration of the art of the irrational. Be rational, but not ignorant. Explore. Most people deny their sixth sense, but no one can deny their second sight for long. Did I believe this mystical stuff? I'm rational, always trying to deny the visions I experience. In some distant reach of my mind, I had nursed the faint hope that denial of my visions would forestall awakening, and suddenly I realized I'd have to translate my clairvoyance into my daily life, make some connection between the metaphysical world and my daily life. I knew there was some mystical thread that strung my life together, but when it came to mysticism, like most people, I was a skeptic. I didn't query my visions. After experiencing a troubling vision, I'd rush to the forest, buy out the whole bucket of daisies, hoping wild flowers would keep me grounded. But not that day. That day, I looked down at the photograph of Madame's granddaughter, and all I could see was my own face smiling innocently for the last time. My own last innocent smile at the age of 7. Did I will this moment? Was it a trick of the mind, my own mind? It was in moments like those that my extensive reading on psychology and mysticism made me wonder whether reality was deviant or I was. Nonsense, I didn't will this moment. I refused to let my psychic ramblings sap my energy. I had no mystical powers. I was like any other psychic with a gift that defied explanation, only I didn't make it my vocation. I didn't read cards or palms or crystal balls. I didn't know how. I had no way of focusing my psychic energy. I had no way of finding a missing child, even if she had been my own daughter, Danielle. Danielle. At that point, a vision uncoiled in my head. My daughter, Danielle. A hand was pulling on her long hair, forcing her down. Another hand was inserting a straw into her nostril, compelling her to inhale the white powder in the saucer laid before her. Why? Why that vision? What possible link could there be between Van Damme's missing granddaughter and my daughter Danielle? A jumble of voices and vision tucked away like my dreams and my nightmares no one could see or hear. If only I could, if only I could locate my premonitions in time, but I never could. Did they refer to past time, present, future? At times these unbidden visions lay dormant for years on end, and then suddenly one day they're ratified. There is one vision that had haunted me for as long as I could remember. I saw a beautiful young woman singing on stage, and a man in black kneeling beside her. Are they my mom and papa? I can see them, Grandpa. Why don't they look at me? There were tears in my grandfather's eyes. He took me in his arms and said, up there, behind the clouds, there is a God that watches over you all the time. But why don't my mama and papa look at me? Not everyone has the gift to see like you, my Anna. See, I was blinded by tears. All I could see were dim impressions, a memory, a fantasy. The only reality was standing in line like the rest of the bleak and hopeless souls pleading. Father's name, the clerk demanded. I shook my head. Happens all the time. A moment of passion, a few seconds of submission. Your mother herself might not have known who fathered you. It only takes seconds to father a child, the clerk said flatly. I didn't know my parents, only that veiled memory of a beautiful young woman singing on stage. I'd been looking for my mother for years. Endless years of correspondence, bureaucratic red tape, refugee agency, one gray building after another, reams of applications and search forms. No one slowed me down. No one could discourage me. My late husband used to say, give it up and go on with your life. My life. In one of my lives, I felt secure, heading Blake Enterprises with power at my fingertips. There I was a successful financier, successful and in control. In my other life, I was obsessive and all out of control, obsessively striving to restore my grandfather's plundered legacy, obsessively haunting the dusty corridors of every refugee agency looking for my mother. There I was an abandoned child, pulled back in time. If I met my mother, would I know her? I even blocked on the vaguest recollection of ever being held by my mother. Why did she leave me? The abandoned child within me begged to know. Deep within me, the confusion of pain, loneliness, and resentment gave way to denial. In trying to deny my past, I denied all self. At times I felt I was surrounding myself with Danielle's puppets, compatible lovers and friends who would give themselves without questions asked. Oh, not Danielle. Danielle always asked questions. My husband died when she was very little, and it was just the two of us. And Danielle was always demanding. Danielle. All I could think of that day was Danielle. I was filled with an odd, disquieting fear that day. Sitting on a bench facing Van Damme, I looked straight into his eyes. My eyes can't hide the truth, not from you, Miss Blake. You read right through me. All but I done it instinctively, like him or anyone else. I told him he'd have to take my word for it. I'm a novice. I'm no super psychic. I meditate by the water. I have premonitions, but they don't add up mathematically. They're nothing I can run to the bank with. Van Damme slumped in the bench. He reminded me of survivors at the end of the war searching for their loved ones. I felt a real compassion for him, but distrust lingered, and Van Damme sensed it. He reached into his pocket and offered me a coin, a token of his authenticity. A glass coin. The eagle one. I felt the blood drain from my face. I felt my arms, legs go weak, numb, cold. I sat there staring at the coin. I closed it in my hand and asked Van Damme if his medium in Amsterdam was a man. Yes, he said. How old is he? Your age, possibly older, Van Damme said cautiously. Does he speak Polish? Yes, you know him. I wanted to say, if your medium knows me, he hasn't seen me in so many years, but I didn't. The coin did nothing to alleviate my mistrust. Where is he now, this medium? On a houseboat in Amsterdam. Alone? Yes. Is he Polish? Yes. I knew who gave him the coin. It was Marek. Marek was 3 years older. I was a girl of 12. We lived in the woods together. We kept each other warm. We lived through 1 year of the war together. We came upon each other in the woods. I was crippled with frostbite. Marek looked at me a good long time, then raised his head and made a high howling noise, a wild cry that called across the dark forest air. His call brought dogs, wild dogs who hunted in the trees for food. Do you have anything, a knife, he asked me. I raised my torn pants leg mutely and showed him the dagger grandfather taped to my ankle. He ripped it away from my skin, then whistled quietly for one of the dogs hovering near. I saw him grab one of the dogs, saw him slit the dog's body from neck to crotch, the blood spurting forth. He dragged the carcass near. Here, put your foot inside, the one with the frostbite. Do it now. Keep it there around your foot now. I obeyed. And my foot was safe. But I never forgot the warmth that flooded my flesh. Never forgot the feel of my flesh inside another's. We survived the winter in the woods together. Marek helped me mold my snow people. We surrounded ourselves with abominable snowmen to ward off the wild beasts and evil spirits. And then one day I awoke, and Marek was gone, as were the 4 coins grandfather taped to my ankle. The lion, the eagle, the cat, the image of man, gone. Only the silver dagger remained. And now, so many years later, he sends one of the coins back to me. Where were you during World War II? I asked Van Damme. In Holland, he said. What was your relationship with the German occupation? Acknowledging against his will, he said, I collaborated. What sort of collaboration? We bought art, paintings, objets d'art that the Nazis confiscated. We? My father and I. Were you forced to do it? He ignored my question. He told me he was the sole survivor of the Van Damme family. The Nazis burnt their home to the ground. His brothers were active in the underground. They were all sent to a labor camp. After the war, he brought the confiscated art to the United States with his own private possessions. He sold it, and with the money made investments for himself and his partners. But it was all so long ago, he said. Partners? These partners, I asked, were they the Nazis who confiscated the art so long ago? Van Damme looked at me for a moment, then nodded yes. Are they still your partners? Yes, he said. And how, may I ask, does it work? You transfer funds to them with an annual report, just your average business transaction? Van Damme stiffened. They're here in New York, he said coldly. Well, I don't suppose these partners of yours had any reason to kidnap your little granddaughter. No, he said vehemently. I even went to them for help. Oh, you mean you suspected them? No, of course not. I knew what Van Damme was doing. He was testing my clairvoyance. Stop hedging, Van Damme. I know you're in there with them. What I want to know is how. Van Damme smiled a small, tight smile. We meet once a week. Just elderly men with some young, silly girls. Once a week. Nothing out of control. But not since my granddaughter disappeared. Not since then, he added hastily. The bottom line, Van Damme, let's have it. He kept silent for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was whispery soft. They wear uniforms, Nazi uniforms. They play old cabaret music. They listen to the Führer's radio speeches. Oh, Nazis. Slowly the puzzle pieces began to shift and make some horrible sense. I remember reaching up to grandfather's face, and his tears washed over my fingertips as we gazed at each other in silence. Then grandfather nodded, beckoned me to follow. He gave me boys' clothes, warm woolen clothes, a pair of heavy shoes, and told me to change. Then he sat me down on a chair in his study and cut off my braids. You must hide your maidenhood to survive, he said. And then I watched him slide aside a wall of books, revealing a secret vaulted room. He unlocked a chest, took out 4 ancient glass coins, and taped them to my ankle. Trail marks, he said. What are trail marks, grandfather? Signs to find the way. What happens if I lose them? Souls, he said, will always find their way. And he drew me close. Don't stop now, grandfather. Tell me more. You must tell me more. He took me in his arms and said, touching. Touching is a forgotten language. Master it and you will know how to say it all. I touch you now with all the knowledge that I have to give you. Shh. Don't speak now. Listen. Listen to my embrace. When all were asleep, grandfather woke me up, his fingers touching my waking face once more. Memorizing. I knew not to ask, not to object, not to utter one last word of farewell. I walked through the door, the coins warm and throbbing on my left ankle, a silver dagger taped to my right. But at dawn, I disobeyed grandfather's instructions. For the first time in my life, I hid and watched. I saw grandfather's brother Benjamin, dressed in his finest black satin coat, carrying 2 leather suitcases out of his house, filled with the family heirlooms of gold, coins, diamonds. Then all my family emerged from their various homes, flowing together to the synagogue where they gathered. I knew Grandfather Daniel told the family he would take care of things. When the Nazis marched their neat, orderly way into Zamość, I saw Uncle Benjamin approach to meet them at the first street of town. The Nazi guns raised themselves before him, firing into his black satin coat before he had a chance to make his promised offering. And then I watched them in neat, orderly ranks advance upon the synagogue. I heard the rapid, brittle gunfire inside the safe and sacred walls. I ran to the side of the synagogue where the windows caught the light from the east and saw the sloughed off bodies falling together. My family's bodies, men, boys, women, and girls, their babies too, all in a pool of blood. But my grandfather wasn't there. Searching for grandfather's body, I forgot every warning grandfather had so carefully bestowed upon me. I ran back into grandfather's mansion through the vast marbled halls until I burst into grandfather's private rooms. The silence in those rooms frightened me. I ran to hide in the upper library. Behind me, the secret door grandfather showed me when I first started to walk. I lay on the gallery floor. Grandfather, are you there? Silence. And then I heard them. I heard their boots coming down the marbled hall. 4 of them, Nazi officers. An older man led the way. He entered through the inner passage. He knew the way. He pressed the hidden lever, revealing the secret vaulted room. Grandfather stood there, poised and waiting, a silver dagger in his hand, and then there was one moment of recognition. But the Nazi pulled out his pistol and fired into grandfather's face. He slumped to the floor. His face disintegrated. I tried not to breathe, gagging on the sickness that rose inside my throat. The 3 officers waited outside while the older man studied the paintings ranged on the shelves. I saw the gleam of ownership in his eyes, his fingers drifting over a yellow-colored Van Gogh and a Rembrandt portrait. And then he began to sift through the manuscripts on the shelves, all handwritten, magnificently illustrated. He picked up the golden box containing the book of our family tree. He raised it. It shone in the muted light, and then he handed it to one of the officers standing nearby, who clasped it to his chest and searched the space around him. And as he searched the space above him, he saw me. He saw me hiding there behind the gallery railing. I slid backwards through grandfather's secret door, ran down the steps, emerged through a maze of buildings until I found beyond the last winding street an open field. I remembered grandfather's voice. The answers are in the questions themselves. I, the witness to blood and murder, I who paid a fortune to retrieve my grandfather's arm, I, of all people, must find the granddaughter of this man? Why? The questions came in a flood. The book of my family tree. Van Damme and his partners, the source of looted art I'd retrieved over the years. Coincidence? A mere coincidence? I told myself that as soon as Van Damme left, I would call Christian Bauer in Zurich. He was the one who helped me retrieve all the art that was looted from my family's house. I never queried Christian Bauer. I trusted him implicitly. All I cared about was getting it back. But suddenly I felt a creeping foreboding I couldn't dispel. Instinctively, I knew it was too soon to confront Van Damme, but I couldn't help saying, "Do you speak Polish?" While Van Damme wavered there in that split instant of vulnerability, I felt a surge of power, a sheer rush of pleasure. God help me if I ever grow to enjoy this. Odd how things eventually fall into place. Years ago, I had a series of verbal premonitions, voices speaking inside my head, conversations between a man and woman in Polish, and I understood it all. Understood a language I thought I'd long forgotten. They spoke urgently, with pain, about biblical curses, the sins of fathers. And now their voices returned. Was the man's voice Van Damme? Did Van Damme speak Polish? How come? Without hesitation, I asked Van Damme in Polish, "Who is this woman you speak Polish with?" My Polish startled Van Damme. His eyes widened. He took a deep breath and said, "My grandmother was Polish." It sounded mechanical, but then so much of what Van Damme said sounded mechanical. I knew I'd have to get an investigator in Holland to dig up all he could on the Van Dammes. I told Van Damme I'd call him. He was aware that I didn't offer my hand when we parted. He bowed slightly and left. My grandfather taped 4 ancient glass coins to my ankle. A boy I loved in the war stole them from me, and so many years later, sent one of the coins back to me with Van Damme. And several days later, I learned of my daughter Danielle's disappearance. She vanished. She wasn't in her apartment in New Haven. Her friends at Yale hadn't seen her on campus for days. I employed a detective, told him to hire a whole army if that's what it took to find Danielle. In my apartment, I wandered through Danielle's rooms. I hoped I could will myself to see, to conjure up an image, find a clue. But no image formed in my mind. Later that night, the doorman announced on the house phone that there was a man downstairs who insisted on seeing me and only gave his first name, Marek. Marek, after all those years. I heard Marek's voice and had the doorman send him up. "Danielle," Marek said, "I came to help. I took the first plane to New York as soon as Van Damme called me." He stretched his arms wide open, drew me close, just as he had in the dark forest of his boyhood. I could only stare at Marek's pale face. I was too overcome to speak. He reached for my hand and read my palm. "We've got to kill to get Danielle back," he said. "I live within the law, Marek. What do they want?" I looked up at him as though I was catching a magician at his wizardry. I told him he didn't show up in my life after all these years, fly all the way to New York to theorize with me on the nature of evil. If Van Damme is evil, I'm not his match. He's promised to help locate the book of my family tree if I find his granddaughter. But now my own daughter Danielle is missing, vanished. "Someone wants you to lose control," Marek said. Who wants me to lose control? They kidnapped my daughter, but no demands were made. "That's how they hope you'll lose control," he said. "Damn it, Marek, what do they want?" "You," he said without hesitation, "you." He told me that in her deathbed confession, an old Polish lady claimed that a young student artist who was later ordained as a priest and rose in the hierarchy of the Vatican, that this young man fathered the child of a young actress. The old lady confessed it all took place in her house, the secret love, the secret birth, and then the child was taken away. My grandfather's housekeeper corroborated that my mother left home at a very young age to pursue an acting career. She came back one day with me in her arms, left me with my grandfather. She only said my father was a man she loved and returned to the theater in Krakow. When Van Damme went to Poland to retrieve the book of my family tree, he didn't find the book, but to appease his partners, he brought them some marketable information. He found out that when I returned to Poland as an adult to look for my parents, I had no documents, only questions. I questioned every theater person who survived the war. Yet there was no record that I ever questioned Adam Zamoyski, who was Cardinal of Krakow at the time and is now Pope. Every theater person I questioned told me that the prominent cardinal, prior to his studies for the priesthood, was an actor in a drama group at the Jagiellonian University of Krakow and acted in the rhapsodic theater that went underground during the war. Though there was no official record that the cardinal ever granted me an audience on my visit to Poland, Van Damme convinced his partners that Cardinal Zamoyski and I met secretly. Why the secrecy? Well, it's a well-known fact that a woman saved Zamoyski's life during the war when he was hit by a German army truck. She rushed him to a hospital and then mysteriously disappeared. Cardinal Zamoyski reported to be searching for that woman. Van Damme and his partners believed that Zamoyski fathered the child with that woman before he embraced the church. But now any aspersions on his celibacy would blemish the Holy See. I was their trump card. They believed the woman was my mother, and I was Zamoyski's daughter. Oh, I know how dense and outlandish this must sound to you. It did to me when I first heard it. I walked the tightrope between fanaticism and madness. Van Damme and his partners wanted to parade me as the daughter of his Holy Father. They are old Austrian Nazis, Marek said. They have one obsession. They'll do anything to intimidate His Holiness to absolve Kurt Waldheim. Insanity to believe they could voice such a lie and that I could intimidate the Pope to offer Waldheim absolution. They're driven men, Anna. You must make sure they don't get their way. How, damn it, how? Van Damme will show me the way, Marek said. I promised to find his granddaughter. I will be in the trunk of the car that goes there. With Van Damme, I asked. Yes, and with you. You mean I'll be abducted? No, you will go to get Danielle. I had to remind Marek that Van Damme knew I was clairvoyant. They might have found a young woman who looked very much like Danielle. In a dark room, I myself might believe it was Danielle. If you don't go there, it won't happen, Marek said. He may just want to lure me out there. Just lure me out there. In your soul, you don't trust me, Marek said angrily. You know, to him, this life of visions and premonitions was as natural as a force of nature, something he accepted, took for granted. He believed I saw it a different way. He saw only with his eyes. I saw with my soul, and my soul distrusted him. Unable to control his temper, he grabbed hold of me. Danielle is in a house with other young women and men in Nazi uniform. You will go there alone. They will phone you, and you will go there by yourself. No chauffeur, no bodyguard. I trusted Marek's passion, but his words didn't ring true to me. I had to become the cold-blooded lawyer and grill him. Why did you come here, Marek? He was taken aback, offended. You asked like a policeman. We're not playing hide and seek in the woods anymore. Why did you send Van Damme to me? Answer my question, damn it. Why did you come here? He tried to regain his composure. They want to compromise the Holy Father, he said. The tall man in the quarry outside Krakow, the man who gave you food, Anna, he called you my child. You stood on the stone and sang for him. You told him your mother sang on stage. He said you looked like her. He knew her. The big stone in the quarry was my stage. I sang for the tall man with the kind eyes, and when I finished, he applauded and said, you look so much like her. I will take you to see her on stage. Then that night we walked to town on a very dark road, and suddenly we were blinded by headlights. A German army truck sped by and struck the tall man. For a long time I held his head in my lap as he lay motionless. When he came to, I helped him to his feet. We walked to a farmer's door, and I told the farmers that the Germans struck a holy man. I don't know why I said holy, but the farmers crossed themselves and took the man to the hospital. It was you who saved Zamoyski's life, Marek asked. He called you my child. There was reverence in Marek's voice, but his zealous face scared me. Your mother survived the war, Marek said. But when she returned to your grandfather's house, to your grandfather's summer house, the Poles who possessed it killed her. They killed her, Anna. Damn you, Marek. You were not there. You tell me half-truths. I hear it in your voice and I see it in your eyes. Marek took a photograph out of his pocket and handed it to me. A father and two sons. Remember them, Anna? I'm the younger one. This is my brother Stefan. Recognize him? He and my father marched into your grandfather's house in Zamość. There were 2 other men with them. All 4 of them in Nazi uniform. Do you remember? Did I remember? And Marek was waiting outside to help them load the truck. He heard shots and suddenly saw me come running out. I looked like a little boy. And a tall Nazi yelled, catch him, little thief, bring him back. Marek ran after me, but he couldn't catch me. They believed I was a boy, a little thief, and they didn't want anyone to survive. And Marek's father assured them that no little boy lived in my grandfather's house. He knew my grandfather well. He knew me too. He was an art dealer from Krakow, did business with my grandfather and all the others they killed. And in the end, they killed Marek's father. They used him, but they didn't want him around. The photograph slipped out of my hand. Marek bent down, picked it up, and placed it on my lap in evidence. I came to atone, he said. All I care about is my daughter, I told him. I'll do anything to save Danielle. Someone must be sacrificed to save her. I'm no good to her dead, Marek. A barter, Marek suggested. I come from a cursed land that rid itself of all your people, and then buried its own priests in the depths of the river. The Holy Father must be absolved. Absolved of what, I asked? If the tall man in the stone quarry was Adam Zaimoyski, he gave me food and clothes. You saved his life, Anna, but we helped the Nazis fuel the ovens. And when the war was over, Zaimoyski couldn't stop our people from killing your mother. They're still digging up graves back home, looking for baby bracelets and wedding rings. They're still searching the mass graves. Only you, Anna, can help us atone for our sins. Please, Anna, please. Please what, Marek? They just want to lure me out somewhere where they can do away with me. I'm their last living witness. Oh no, Anna, they forgot whose homes they lived in. It was so long ago. Van Damme only wants to find his granddaughter. But it's the partners who want you to force the Pope to offer Kurt Waldheim absolution, and I'll be damned if they get their way. Please, Anna, allow me to atone, Marek cried. I took him in my arms. He read in my embrace an acceptance of his daughter. He left as abruptly as he came. The following morning, the phone rang. The caller warned me not to put Chris on the line if I wanted to see my daughter Danielle. I was to pack a suitcase for myself and Danielle, take a cab to LaGuardia, East Terminal. No bodyguards, no chauffeur, no hidden electronic devices hidden on me or in the suitcase. I insisted on talking to Danielle before I went anywhere. I was told to wait for her call. Detective McNeil objected vehemently to my going alone. What else could I do? Tell Danielle I wouldn't come because my own life was in danger. 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Danielle, sounding like she did when she was a little girl in her first week of summer camp. A small, terrified voice. Take me home, Mom. I'm coming, I said. Okay, Blake. 8 p.m. outside the East Terminal at LaGuardia. And the line went dead. I wandered into Danielle's rooms and stood in front of her huge puppet stage. I reached out and touched the puppet that had Danielle's likeness. It trembled at my touch, crying in a soft voice, "Take me home, Mom." Detective McNeil stood at the door, startled. "Take me home, Mom," the soft voice cried. McNeil rushed over to the huge stage and pulled the Danielle puppet off its stick. He tore the puppet apart. Inside, he found an electronic sensor and a voice transmitter. "Take me home, Mom," the voice cried softly out of a tape recorder in McNeil's hand. Dad, what kind of people are they? And then I remembered the vision of a hand pulling on Danielle's long hair, forcing her down, another hand inserting a straw into her nostril, compelling her to inhale the white powder in a saucer laid before her. That vision replayed in my head all the way to the airport. I stood at the entrance to the East Terminal like any late commuter and waited. Van Damme rolled down the window of his black Mercedes. "Get in, Miss Blake, please." I obeyed. And as I sat back, I knew, my body told me, Marek was there. He was there right behind me in the trunk. I could feel him as surely as I felt him in the dark forest. We drove in total silence. After a silent 20-minute drive, the car pulled into a parking lot of a railway station. It was dark. The parking lot was empty. I was ordered out of the car with my luggage. Van Damme had a metal detector in his hand, raised like a weapon. He took the bag from my hand, glanced around, assuring him he was unobserved, and ran the metal detector over my body, over my bag, everything scanned and verified. We got back into the car and circled along black country roads for over an hour, circling to make sure we were not followed. I knew it would be useless to have McNeil follow us in the car. An hour later, Van Damme's car sped through heavy gates that opened electronically and pulled up in front of a great stone mansion. I was led through a side door and told that Danielle was upstairs on the second floor. As I walked up, I realized that the stairs led down to a basement. Danielle stood at one of the doors on the second floor, wrapped in a white terry cloth robe, 2 sizes too big. As I moved to take her in my arms, she pulled back. "Are my clothes in the bag?" she asked. She rushed into the room and started to dress. Everything told me she was strung out on cocaine, her movement, her posture, impatient, commanding. I kept my distance for a moment. "No one's talked to me," I said. Danielle's eyes blazed. "What do you mean? Didn't they tell you what they want? Give them what they want. Get us out of here." "No one's talked to me yet," I said calmly. "So what? You don't negotiate with those kinds of people. You give them what they want. Take my money. Take all the money in my trust fund. I don't care, but just get me out of here now." I kept my voice calm. "I will give them all the money they want, I promise you." "But when? Why didn't you agree to it before you ever came here?" "Because they insisted that I come here first. That was very stupid of you." "I came to be with you. I don't need a goddamn babysitter," Danielle shouted, her face flushed, feverish. "Why can't you get it through your head I'm not a little girl anymore?" "I had to see you alive," I said. Danielle laughed. "You make a lot of speculative investments, but on my life you won't speculate. You have to see me alive before you deal." "Just let her talk," I said to myself. Let her vent all her anger and frustration. It was all a jumble of cocaine. She won't remember any of it by tomorrow. Won't have to regret what she had said. I was always insecure with Danielle. I had no mother to emulate, no mistakes to repeat. It was was as if I was expected to invent motherhood. I offered myself as a friend. A friend was like making up for my own lost childhood. Yet I envied my daughter, envied her for the love I myself showered on her. But that wasn't the moment when I could indulge in guilt and insecurity. Van Damme stood at the door. He walked in. He offered me a folder, told me all the details were there. It was researched and documented. I was to memorize it. I was to leave for Rome the next day. There was a man in the Curia in Rome. I was to call him and demand an audience with my father, Adam Zamoyski. Once he, the Pope, offered Kurt Waldheim absolution, my daughter Danielle would be set free. You don't really believe they're going to release your little granddaughter, Perry. Van Damme closed his eyes. Open your eyes, damn it. These partners of yours are mixing liquor and cocaine, and you're scared out of your wits. Your little granddaughter is just the least of it. You suspected them all the time. Isn't that why you went to your medium in Amsterdam? Only he sent you to me, Anna Blake by the water. And who do I happen to be but one of your long-lost victims? Van Damme shook his head. My father didn't leave me much choice, but Martin, my son, he was born in the United States after the war. Surely he's not responsible. He's a self-made man. He had no share in all that we took. You must understand, Miss Blake. I understand, all right. You went to Harvard. What money paid for it? He's had a share. Van Damme shook his head angrily. All you care about is vengeance. You don't care who gets killed. As long as you get your revenge on a few harmless old men. You're a vindictive bitch, Anna Blake. You're all vindictive bastards. All of you. Vengeance? Will you be able to avenge your granddaughter if they kill her? Is there any revenge that can make her run back into your arms? My grandfather Danny listened back now that I found the harmless old Nazis who killed him. How does one avenge? Van Damme is losing his cool. The whole world is sick and tired of all your suffering. Millions of Poles have been killed. Tens of millions of Russians and Chinese killed. Africans slaughtered. They're not all asking for revenge. They're not polluting the world with Holocaust literature and Nazi movies. I wish I didn't have to answer him, but I felt I did for Danielle's sake. And you would like to rewrite history so they won't make a movie of you and your looting. It afforded you and your partners a good life all these years. Danielle suddenly screamed out, give them what they want. Who cares if the Pope offers them absolution? Go to Rome. I care, Danielle. I care. You want proof of my identity? This is my proof. I donate most of my fortune to make sure that what the Kurt Waldheims have done won't be erased and forgotten. You? She said, you paid a fortune to retrieve your grandfather's art. You didn't ask the art dealers where they got it from. You made it the crime that paid. But now that you have to save my life, you're holier than thou. I felt the slim control I had on myself slipping away. I grabbed hold of Danielle and held her tight, forcing her to listen. Yes, I paid a fortune to recover grandfather's legacy, but it's not the possessions. It's his spirit I needed restored. Otherwise, I'd have nothing left, not even a childhood photograph. But this man, he's not a mere collaborator. He's a killer. His father shot my grandfather in cold blood, and he stood there waiting for the loot. He and his father and two other men walked into Grandfather Daniel's house. They took my grandfather's life. They stole an extraordinary collection of art. Rembrandts, Van Goghs, they did business with my grandfather. He was on their list. Yes, they had a list, and they went on looting, only making sure we were all killed, that there would be no witnesses left. They killed the Van Dams in Amsterdam and made this man take Theo Van Dam's name. He's not Theo Van Dam. He's Stefan Wozniak, Marek's brother. Have I figured it all out? There is one witness left, Stefan Wozniak. If you have any memory at all, you'll remember that small boy watching you. It was me. Yes, that's right. I was dressed as a boy. I saw your father hand you the golden box containing the book of our family tree. You looked up and saw me watching you there. His mouth half open in shock. He stood there, and when he finally spoke, he said, "The people who bought it burnt the book. They were angry. They tried to melt the gold, but it was gilded. It wasn't real gold." He answered my accusation of murder and looting with one trivial detail. It wasn't real gold, but everything else was real that day. 37 members of my family were killed that day, as real as your little granddaughter, Carrie. I didn't kidnap her, your Austrian friends did. Someone in Krakow recognized you when you went back there to locate the book of my family tree. Someone revealed the secret switched identities of Van Dam Wozniak. Your harmless old partners abducted your little Perry so you wouldn't cut loose. You didn't think they'd take such a chance. You can comprehend the killing of 1 million children. That kidnap your little granddaughter seemed far-fetched. She's somewhere on this compound, and they're not going to let go of her. Go see the Holy Father, he said. His holiness will save our children. Beads of sweat broke out on his forehead. His eyes were searching for hidden microphones. He wasn't addressing only me. Someone was listening in. He thrust the folder in my hand and left the room. Danielle stared into my face. Talk to her, a voice in my head said. Tell her it's all madness, speculation, unproven, unverified, cast on as facts. I held the folder Madame thrust in my hand in front of Danielle and said, my father may have been an actor like my mother. They may have acted in the Rhapsodic Theater that went underground during the war. And they may have acted with the man who is now Pope. It's possible that the man who is now Pope gave me food when I was a little girl surviving the war. That he was the man I saved when he was hit by a German army truck. Your mother, Danielle whispered. Did she live? My mother was murdered at the end of the war by the people who occupied grandfather's house. My mother is dead. I, 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 I heard myself say it out loud for the first time in my life. In a room filled with the sound of cabaret music and laughter, young women undressed, elderly men removed their Nazi uniforms, the women opened their palms, offering white powder. A little blonde girl was ushered in, naked and shy. One of the women advanced and began to caress her. Mark was in the laundry room below. He disconnected the gas pipe from the dryer and hooked it to the garden hose with masking tape. He uncoiled the long hose and brought it to the room where the elderly men and their companions were partying. He opened the door slightly, just enough to allow a few inches of hose into the room. It was a mere precaution. A little gas to numb their senses in the event that the cocaine Van Damme supplied them with didn't take effect. He stood outside, waiting. When Marek entered the room, all the women were in a daze. The men lay numb. Marek grabbed hold of the little girl, flung open the French doors, and ran outside. The opening of the French doors set off an alarm system that released Doberman from their cages. Van Damme drove his car out of the garage, stopped, opened the door, reached for the little girl. Too late. The alarm released the herd of Doberman. They sprang forward. Van Damme stumbled and fell. Marek kicked the dog's churning body, trying to release the little girl. Another Doberman imprisoned his foot in its sharp teeth. And then I heard him, that terrifying echo from the past. I heard him howl as he'd done in the woods when he faced the wild dogs that attacked us. He howled, his voice wild and unrestrained. But the trained dogs ignored him. I ran downstairs with Danielle, down the stairway that led to the basement. We got into the car, keys were in the ignition. I started the car, I slammed it into reverse, pressed the accelerator, roaring out backwards into the open. I swung sharply to the right, bumped over the lawn where Marek rolled and twisted, fighting the dogs. They leaped up at the car windows, growling. I flung the car into reverse, then wrenched the door open. The Dobermans abandoned Marek Van Damme and the little girl and sprang towards me. I slammed the door shut, shifted gears, stepped on the gas, hitting the dogs as they circled madly in front of the car, then drove on to Marek Van Damme and the little girl. Danielle, sitting beside me, screamed. In the glare of the headlights, she saw the last remaining dog sniff around the bodies. The Doberman turned, faced the headlights, raced towards the car. I hit him full force. Van Damme Bosniak lay dead. I jumped out of the car. I ran to Marek, the little girl's mutilated body in his arms. Marek, torn and bloody, cried with his last breath, "Forgive us, Anna. Forgive. Forgive and forget." Forget? How can I forget? They told the women and girls to undress. They thought I was a little boy. I stood there wearing grandfather's trousers and boy's cap. We were ordered down into a pit filled with bodies. Suddenly they opened fire, mowing us down. I fell flat on my stomach, buried my head in my trousers. They filled the pit with water. Soft sighs of dying, eyes staring blankly at the sky. The water tinted with blood purple, then darkened. They were pulling me down to the bottom of the pit. It was going right through me. I crawled out of the pit somehow and ran. For as long as I can remember, I have been mastering the art of survival. I came out of the forest into the new world and somehow found a semblance of peace and tranquility. And suddenly I was awakened to seek proof of my identity. In some distant reach of my mind, I had nursed the belief that denial of my visions would forestall awakening. No more. In the mystical world, I may walk the tightrope, blindfolded, without a net. But once I come crashing down, I'm as accountable as everyone else. Hope? Is there hope? Oh, yes. But we must beware of the snow people. They're ordinary people like us. They come back again and again in many disguises. We mustn't let them deceive us.